here's kind of the playbook for what you need to do, and you follow this, and it's going to be hard. It will.
Mm,
It's going to be hard. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but I guarantee you most of those, or if not all those people, have done something harder in their life. And once they kind of get going on that path, like, you know, they'll get there. They will.
yeah. Hello and welcome to Health and Humanity with Dan Voss, a new podcast show centered around improving health and improving our human connection and relationships. I have with me today Jared Sheeran. Jared leads product marketing at Zipongo, a nutrition digital health platform that focuses on changing eating habits. Previously, he was a healthcare engagement manager at McKinsey & Company and started and sold a web-based startup focused on helping baby boomers identify their ideal retirement location. He is a certified personal trainer, has nutrition and diabetes prevention program certifications, and has spent his spare time on health coaching for obese children. His calling in life is to reverse the obesity trend we're facing as a country. Jared, how are you, man?
Good, good. How are you doing, Dan?
Pretty good. I can't complain, all things considered. I do have my health, and I think that's about as good as it can get right now. So,
Yes, it's very easy to complain these days, I find, but anytime you're complaining about not leaving the house or whatever it is, or, figuring out what you're going to watch on Netflix, could be a lot worse. So it's like,
absolutely, absolutely. I've been saying to a lot of people in the last month or so, how lucky we are if this were to happen, a global pandemic. We're very lucky that it's happening in 2020 and not 1975, where we didn't have FaceTime or we couldn't have calls like this together or social media or Netflix or anything like that. It just makes it much easier with technology. So, well, good. I'm glad you're doing well.
yeah, you too.
Cool. Yeah. And just before we begin, just for our audience, I guess I can share, Jared and I are friends here in Chicago. And we actually did a Ragnar race. I think that was about a year ago. I think it was May of 2019.
Well, I guess so. I've tried to block it from my memory for the most part, not because of you, but because of what we're actually doing.
Sure. No, I'm the same way. I thought it was a really cool experience. So just for our listeners and viewers that don't know, a Ragnar race is an extended race. The one we did was from Chicago to Madison, Wisconsin, which I think is probably about 200 plus miles. I would
Right.
say.
Yeah, that's about right.
And they have them all over the country and probably all over the world. But basically, you have a team. I think it's a team of 12, right? There's 6 in each van. You have 2 different vans, 6 people in each van, and you share different legs of the race. So at any given time, you're running anywhere from like 4 to, let's say, 10 miles for your single leg, and then you get some rest, and then you go back out a couple hours later. Cool experience. I really liked certain parts of it, but I'm with you. I would absolutely never do that again.
Well, it's just one of those things. You're like, you're in the middle of it, and that you haven't slept in hours, and maybe you start dozing off a little bit while someone else is driving at 3 a.m. And you're stopping. You're thinking to yourself, and you're like, why am I paying money to do this right now? And I'm all for fitness and everything, more than most people, I'm sure, but it's just one of those things where it's like, you know what? Great, glad we did it. I'm not
Yep.
itching to sign up for it anytime soon.
100%. I think that's a great summary. It was a cool thing to check off the list, but for me, that lack of sleep, and the bus or the van I was in, we had the like big chunk of time in the middle of the night where we ran from like 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. and you get zero sleep. And I just remember by like 6 or 7 a.m. on that next day, it was just like, what am I doing? This is brutal. So yeah, needless to say, we'll not be doing that again, but cool experience.
Yes, completely agreed.
Yeah, cool. So I want to get into, we have a lot to unpack here, especially given the field that you're in and the work that you do and everything that's going on in the current climate. So let's start with Zipongo. Why don't you share more about the company and the work that you do for Zipongo?
Yeah, I'm happy to, Dan. So Zipongo is a B2B2C company, right? Meaning, we work with health plans and employers to help their members for health plans and employers for their employees really change their eating habits. And when you take a step back, what happened is digital health exploded, right? And you've probably seen some digital health features before, like Headspace, for instance, is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Or there are so many different apps for digital health right now. And really another great one is Weight Watchers that people use, and some people see some great results from it, which is awesome. A lot of the issue, though, right, is nutrition is just fundamentally at the foundation of so much of who we are in our health today, right? And people try to just create hacks for that, right? And that's where I think a lot of diet trends come out. And
Mm-hmm.
here's like a fun fact for you that I think is that most people don't know. Well, let me ask you a question. What percent of people that you think go on diets end up regaining their weight?
Oh man, percentage wise, I would
Yeah,
say it's high, 90%.
that's
Is
exactly
that right?
90%. Yeah, I
Pull that one
promise.
out.
I promise I didn't feed Dan the answer. But you're right. It's 90%, which is incredible if you think about it. And so you have this billions of dollars that's being generated in the kind of the diet industry here,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not working. And then you have all these apps that are coming out, and some of them are working really well for specific things people are struggling with. Like Headspace is a phenomenal app for meditation, and I meditate every day, and I think it works really well.
Mm-hmm.
But food is, I think, the biggest issue that isn't being addressed well. And like we continue to look at stats, and the problem is we just, you know, bypass this because something feels more urgent. But most recent obesity rates are 42%. 42%. You take 10 people down the street, 4 people of those are obese. I'm not even talking overweight. I'm talking obese
Mm-hmm.
here,
Wow.
right? And the problem is a lot of us live in bubbles, so we don't see it that much, but it's a very real problem.
Mm-hmm.
And why does that matter? I mean, because costs for those people are a lot higher for sure. And, there's a very high correlation with diabetes and heart disease and hypertension and a lot of things that cost a lot, but they're also just really terrible outcomes, right? For those
Mm-hmm.
people, they're hard lives that they have to live there. And so, taking this all back, right, this all comes back to nutrition. And so Zipongo basically said, look, the cards are stacked against people, right? You have, billions of dollars spent by the fast food industry every year on advertising to people. You have billions of dollars spent by CPG companies, right? So anything packaged or processed that you're buying in the store probably isn't good for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, here's another thing, Dan, when you walk into the grocery store, right? What have you ever noticed anything about the layout of grocery stores?
Mm-hmm. You got all of the what would most people would know as healthy food, organic food you have on the outside, and then everything that's processed seems to be on the inside of the grocery store. Probably majority of the grocery store is packaged processed food. Is that about right?
That's exactly right. So you have the biggest part of the store, and the part that's most easy to access is the most unhealthy.
Yeah.
So, right. So, yeah, of course,
And
like people are going to gain weight. Like the cards are stacked against them here.
yeah, and if I can add to that, and something that's extremely alarming, if you go to the grocery store right now, or especially a few weeks ago when a lot of the lockdowns were announced and everyone was starting to freak out about getting food and having enough food for whatever may come, you go into a grocery store and all of the anything that's good for you is probably available, and all of the bad food is cleared out. Breads, any kind of processed food is all cleared out, which is pretty scary.
It is. And I'm very eager to see what the data is going to show during this time, because it's an opportunity for people to relearn some basic fundamentals about cooking that as a
Hmm.
country we've just neglected.
Yeah.
And by the way, you don't have to be a good cook to eat healthy, or it doesn't have to cost a lot, or
Sure.
it's that's like a very big misconception. It's not expensive, right? So it depends what you're cooking, but I know, Dan, you're probably cooking with caviar and things like that.
That's right. Of course.
Trust mortals. But you're exactly right. It's very alarming, because all the people are like, well, there's nothing at the grocery stores. I can't get things. And it's the reality is, well, the good stuff, like the good stuff, good being defined as the healthy things that actually have nutrients, that stuff's there.
Yeah.
It's the bad stuff. And I
It's
think people need
alarming.
to get over this point of, you're right, there's kind of this initial alarm of the processed food is what will stay, it'll stay good longer. And I think
Sure.
people initially alarmed like, well, am I going to be able to get access to food for a while or everything be sold out? And we're past
Mm.
that, right? We have a pretty
Right.
robust infrastructure here in the US to make sure that food supply is there. So it's
Hmm.
like, okay, now that we've gotten past that, like everyone needs to go back to buying healthy things, but I just think people don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, what Zipongo basically said is, look, the cards are stacked against people. What everyone's doing right now isn't working because obesity rates and related diabetes and hypertension rates and heart disease rates keep going up.
Hmm.
By the way, a lot of those things are some of the biggest killers in the US here, right? Or cause of death. And so let's actually look at the root cause behind this biggest issue and
Mm.
actually focus on changing people's eating behaviors. So really, Sapongo consists of a set of tools, right, that helps address every issue people have with eating healthy. And
Sure.
we can go through like what those causes are, and I'd be curious what you think they are. But it's that's kind of the purpose and our what we or how we go about accomplishing this mission of changing behaviors.
Sure. You mentioned, I think it's a pretty interesting point about there's this idea that buying healthy food, eating healthy is expensive. What are your thoughts and what are you seeing in terms of healthcare costs? A lot of the disease that we see is a result from poor nutrition. So what are your thoughts on, yeah, you might spend a little bit more money up front buying healthier foods, but in the long run, if you eat poorly and you end up getting diseases at higher healthcare costs, at the end of the day, you're going to be spending more money in hospital bills than you would your grocery bill. Does that sound about right to you?
Well, see, it's a good question, right? There's a couple aspects of it. One is there's a short-term and long-term effect, right? And the short-term reality is, especially in your younger years, you can get away with it, right? And you can, eat some bad food, but one, you're still gonna feel pretty bad, right?
Yeah,
And I don't know, you and I both probably, I wouldn't pretend that I eat, I try to eat well 95% of the time, but
sure.
occasionally, yeah, you have a few too many slices of pizza. And I don't know about you, but I feel pretty bad usually the next day.
100%.
Right. So there's like the short term bit of, being able to be your best self and feeling that. And if you do that, those pizzas enough times, then guess what? Right now you could be talking about healthcare costs in the shorter term that
Hmm.
you probably weren't expecting, right? The incidences of childhood obesity is up 3x. Childhood diabetes,
Hmm.
right? I'm talking type 2 diabetes, not type 1. Type 2
Sure.
diabetes was virtually non-existent for children, and now that's become a thing, right? So
Hmm.
you now have children who are costing a lot more money and now have to figure out how they're going to regularly check their blood sugar levels,
Wow.
involves pricking their fingers and needles, and it's and technology's advanced a little bit there, so I'm being a little bit simplistic, but
Yeah.
so there's the short term effect, and then there's the long term where it's like, okay, is it really going to, like, and there's this kind of approach that people take. It's like, well, YOLO, and I'm going to eat unhealthy now. And it's like, well, what do you think is going to happen when you get down the road? Like, it's not
Hmm.
just how long you're going to live, but the quality of that life that you're going to live.
Sure.
And, based on how our healthcare systems structured today, you're right. You are going to be on the hook for personally a lot of money that you're going to have to pay to your pocket.
Hmm.
And then guess who else is paying for it? Either your employer, and I don't know, maybe some people don't care about that, but or it's us, right? It's the taxpayers who end up
Hmm.
paying for it most of the time. And so you're right, there is the trade-off there. And I think that there is the opportunity. I don't think it needs to be an investment. I think it can be a trade-off for a lot of people when they look at how they're spending their money.
Hmm.
We, as a developed country, we spend less on food and groceries than almost any other developed country,
Hmm.
right? Because
Wow.
we have culturally come to it. And the other thing we do is we spend less time cooking than in
Mm-hmm.
developed country, right? So we've culturally developed to become this food becoming this instant thing that we do, right? Where we need to just get it fast and consume it fast, and we expect to pay very little for it. When in
Sure.
reality, countries like India, right? Obviously not a developed country, but they spend hours and hours preparing a meal, and it
Mm-hmm.
becomes this family cultural event,
Yeah.
and that's become lost in this country.
Wow. Do you see that? Do you see us as a country ever regaining that sense of culture where we can spend more time cooking and just, I guess, at a very basic level, eat healthier? And the example, I guess, that comes to mind, in a way, you can look at it as ignorance. You look back at anywhere prior to, let's say, 1970s. A lot of people smoked cigarettes, in this country and probably, I guess, worldwide, and didn't know the harmful effects of smoking cigarettes. And then as that education came out, I think there was a shift in terms of mindset to where people realized, like, oh, this is something that's going to kill me. I shouldn't be smoking cigarettes. Do you see that happening at all in terms of nutrition, where we wake up and say, wow, this is killing us? Is there ever going to be a mindset shift there for us?
You know, it's a really great question, and I wonder, like, what is the tipping point to get there, right? Because
Mm,
42% obesity doesn't seem to be that, right? And we're at, I think, like 11% type 2 diabetes, or that might be includes, regardless, 11% of country diabetic right now. And it's like, what percent does it need to be for it to for people to actually step in and do something?
right.
And part of it is the way our government's set up, right? From a lobbying perspective, it there's so much money being funded by these CPG companies and fast food companies and whatnot, that in order
Mm,
to actually create law around this, there's just a lot of incentives in place for that not to be the case. So and I don't see that changing. Lobbying laws changing anytime soon. So,
wow.
like, what would it take for that to happen? It has to take people on a community level to make those changes. And that's
Hmm.
kind of, there's uh, a phenomenal idea called blue zones, right, which is creating these communities that encompass things like being active and cooking more and getting fresh produce and figuring out
Mm,
how to use that based on these kind of blue zones of healthy groups around the world that have been studied, who have the longest group of people, or the largest amount of, or the largest concentration of people who have lived above 100 years old, and saying, what are they doing that makes them live so long and such great lives?
mm,
And then incorporating that into individual communities here versus trying to do that large. And maybe that's the approach to doing it, because I think depending on our government to do something about it, I mean, I don't know, to your analogy of cigarettes, like, why are we still advertising cereal like Lucky Charms to children,
right.
right? We know that they're terrible for them,
Right. And
so I don't know, like, what it will take, unfortunately, at a government level or at an individual level, for people to kind of like wake up and really start changing.
sure, there's a few things I want to touch on here. The blue zones that you mentioned, I've been listening and learning more about that through a doctor. His name is Dr. Stephen Gundry. Um, I first came across him. He was on Lewis Howe's podcast. Lewis has a School of Greatness podcast. So Dr. Gundry came on, and he's been talking. He actually lives in a blue zone. He's in Southern California. I can't remember which city.
Mhm.
But just a side note, he talks about that quite a bit. His whole thing, he has a book called The Plant Paradox.
Okay.
And he goes into lectin-free foods and how lectins, which is a certain type of protein, you probably know more about it than I do, but it's a certain type of protein that is bad for your gut. So anyhow, that's just a side note for our listeners if you want to check out Dr. Stephen Gundry. The other thing we were talking about here is, what is it going to take for us to wake up to the idea that we are slowly killing ourselves. And I don't want to be like super depressing and morbid with the current situation, because it is so sad and it's so awful to see people being hospitalized, after getting the coronavirus, and some of them are dying, and that's a horrible situation. But what's really interesting to me is that we hear from some of our experts saying, if you have a pre-existing condition, you're more likely to die from getting the coronavirus. And then it seems like the conversation kind of stops there, like as if we're accepting the fact that if you have a pre-existing condition, then it's like, oh shoot, you have the short end of the stick. If you die, you die. And that's such a horrible way of looking at it. But it seems like universally, when you talk about that, that's kind of the attitude towards it. Instead, people, in my opinion, should be looking at, well, what are those pre-existing conditions, and what can we be doing so that we don't have those pre-existing conditions, so that we're not at a higher risk of dying. So I don't know what your thoughts are there. Do you think maybe something like a global pandemic, where you look at certain conditions that you have, can now put you at a higher risk of dying? Do you think it's something like that that could maybe wake us up?
I I don't know if like what I would be curious is for, and there are ranges of these conditions, right? For instance, if I was someone with prediabetes and I looked at it and said, wow, if I have diabetes, my chances of being in the ICU or being hospitalized in general or potentially dying are a lot higher. Like, I need
Hmm.
to do something about this. I don't know if that is kind of people's reactions. But I think there's two parts to this, right? There's one is, I think a lot of people just don't know how to eat
Hmm.
well, and I think
Sure.
that's something we all assume. We assume we're like, oh, people are just lazy, or like they just don't have self discipline, or and that is an incredibly wrong assumption um, to make, because one, a lot of people don't know, right?
Sure.
They how to eat healthy. They think they do, but they don't, and it's not their fault. They just think about how much time we spend eh, as children, right, learning about what to eat. I don't know
Yeah.
how much time do you think you spent in the classroom learning about what to eat? A couple hours, maybe.
Yeah, not much compared to the rest of curriculum, right?
Yeah, but you spent hours playing dodgeball. I don't know. Maybe that's been helpful, but right. And so that's one aspect. And then what you were taught was probably wrong, right? You were taught, you probably, by this old food pyramid where you need to be getting,
Mm,
an incredible amount of dairy a day. Whereas, by the way, that was funded by, another massive lobbying group.
sure.
And so then it's like, well, what you were taught was wrong. And then, so you now have people who don't really know what to eat, who are kind of in these situations. And then it's kind of, it's really hard to change habits and behavior. And a lot of
Sure.
it's, you look at things like sugar, which, in some studies is more addictive than cocaine.
Mm,
And it's, to get people to stop consuming that, it's really difficult. And so, even if people are looking at this and they're aware that, they're like, wow, I got to do something to change, because otherwise, if I catch this disease, like, I could die a lot sooner, or I could end up like in intensive care.
right.
Like, sure, some people will consciously make that change, but a lot of people just don't know what to do,
Mm,
or they're just like, I can't help myself.
right.
Right. And that's kind of the sad part behind this. And the good thing is that people are now at home more, they're with their families more, and so it's an opportunity for people to stop and say, I'm going to try making my own food versus buying something from takeout or buying fast food or whatever it is,
Mm,
and actually getting the nutrients and the like what they've been neglecting for so long. And it might be a
sure.
disaster. What they might cook might be terrible, but it's at least a stepping stone. It's a starting point. And I hope that when we walk away from this, we don't miss that opportunity.
Mm, absolutely. I think, me personally, I have really taken steps to improve my health overall. I mean, I'm not necessarily exercising more than I was before, but I am just like, my overall self care has definitely improved, probably more so on the mental health side of things, like meditating more and doing deep breathing and getting better sleep. But then also with nutrition, I am eating better. But I think what's important for those that are listening that do struggle with eating healthier, like you said, it is really tough to change habits, especially if you've been doing them for years. So I just personally am noticing like little wins, and it's okay if you're not perfect across the board in terms of nutrition, but if you can just make a step in the right direction each day and each week, I think you'll see improvement over time. So super interesting. I do want to read. I have one bit of information here on the topic of everything going on with the coronavirus. I read a report the other day, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. That there are kind of going back to what I was saying with pre-existing conditions and higher death, results in higher death rates. There's a report that showed different cities, and the example they gave was New Orleans, and how they have a higher rate of diabetes and obesity, and thus they had a higher rate of death rate. And by the way, I don't want to make it sound like if you do have a pre-existing condition, or if you have something like diabetes or you are obese, that automatically means you're at higher risk of dying. It certainly doesn't help. But what I'm getting at is I don't want to make light of virus. Virus, it's Mother Nature. It's going to do what it does. And so I don't want to have anybody misconstrue what I'm saying here. So what else in terms of nutrition do you think we can be improving on? What maybe some foods that you think we could be eating more of?
It's an interesting question because a lot of our users or our clients, they'll come to us and they'll have questions about specific superfoods, right? And that's kind of the buzz these days. And they'll ask these questions about things like elderberry, or like, should I be eating more of that? And or they'll hear reports to be like, oh, I heard eggs are bad. Like, should I not be eating eggs? Someone would be like, well, I heard eggs were good. Should I be eating eggs? And they're asking the wrong question, right? Because it's not about individual foods. Like,
Mm,
sure, we know that probably anything processed, like if I'm eating like pretzels, is that good for me? No, right? But it's more about the groups of foods that people are eating. And and sure, we know things that by consuming certain spices like, turmeric, which yes, it's very healthy for you. No, like you shouldn't be consuming like globs of it, or
mm.
be brushing your teeth with it, which is not good. Like, like garlic, right? Like some of these things, yes, they're good for you, but they're not. There's no silver bullet. They're
Right.
not pills, right? It's
Mm,
collectively what you should be doing. So, and most of it's not different than some of the things you were probably taught as a kid, right? You should be eating a lot more fruits and vegetables. Like that's
hmm.
kind of the foundation of it.
Sure.
And it's people assume that eating vegetables, it needs to be this like, you know, really just painful thing where it's like, oh God, I guess I'm gonna, force myself to do this here. And it doesn't need to be that way. And,
Hmm.
I would really encourage people to take a look at incorporating them into recipes, right? Where, or figuring out other ways to creatively get them, whether it's like veggie based pastas, which, I think people like kind of take a step back to like, that can't be good. Like that's going to taste terrible. And I think you like do blind taste tests. People don't even know. Right.
Sure.
So, it's really getting more fruits and vegetables in your plate on your diet there. So that's kind of one thing. The
Hmm.
second is it's really just avoiding those unhealthy foods, or that those processed foods.
Mm,
And it's hard, right? It's really hard. And I think a lot of people assume because of like my background and what I know around the subject. And there's people who know a lot more than I do, but I think I know a lot more than the general public. Is that they assume they're like, oh well, you must not eat any of this stuff, right? And I'm just as susceptible as everyone else is because sugar is highly addicting. That's why
right.
I don't keep things like ice cream or Oreos and that in the house, because guess what? It's not like my self discipline is through the roof. That's
Sure.
not it. It's just if it's not there, you won't eat it, right?
Right.
If you
Right.
make it hard enough for yourself to go consume it, you won't. So
Hmm.
the best thing you can do is just not have that stuff in your house.
Yeah.
Like, believe me, I love going out and getting, a nice scoop of Jenny's ice cream and enjoying that, or some nice ice cream once in a while, right?
Sure.
But that I intentionally have to go walk or make an effort to go to Jenny's to get that ice cream and
Yeah.
consume it, which means I'm going to consume a lot less than if I keep it in my freezer, right,
Yep.
and rarely have ice cream there. So keeping the processed food or anything that's unhealthy for you out of your house,
Mm,
and finding things that you like, especially snacks. That's where a lot of people go awry. And finding things that you do like, right? Like things like nuts, things like certain types of fruits there,
hmm.
right? There's a lot of different things you can be consuming around this, or like, I don't know, hummus or like any, you shouldn't be eating like massive amounts of chips with hummus, but there's like hummus and veggies, and finding the right hummus there can be
Sure.
a great alternative. And the last thing is just people are just really hungry, right? And one of the main reasons behind that is because people just don't consume enough water. And people
Yeah.
will be like, no, 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 I drink a lot of water. They're like, I have this like, like this thing here, this thermos, and I drink one of these throughout the day here.
Mm,
And the reality is it's not enough, right? You should be getting probably close to 3 liters a day. And, that's a rough guide, give or take. And that's a lot of water. But if you're consuming enough water there, your hunger levels are going to fall quite a
yep.
bit. So what your mind is mistaking as hunger is really just thirst that you haven't fulfilled.
Sure.
So those are the couple things that are like the really easy things that everyone can be doing
Mm,
to be eating healthy.
yeah. I want to mention, in addition to drinking more water, I've actually been drinking a lot more green tea lately. And that's just another great way to kind of, fills up your stomach. It makes you also think like, I'm not as hungry as I thought I was, just by having a little bit more tea or water or whatever it is. Another thing I want to touch on is, it sounds like what you were saying in terms of, you don't put the bad foods in your house, otherwise you will be tempted to eat them. That makes me think about how really a lot of eating healthier, it comes down to the decisions that we make, and you call it prep work, before we ever eat anything. So what that means is, before you go to the grocery store, it's having that willpower of, okay, here's my list and this is all I'm going to go for. And when I get to the grocery store, and this is all I'm getting. And then you come back with those foods, and then that way you don't have to be tempted, like you said. So I think a lot of it is the decisions we make in that prep time before we even go to the grocery store.
You're exactly right, Dan. That's one of the easiest things people can do, right? Otherwise, especially for families, right? Then you start having different family members like, I'm going to get this and I'm going to get
Yep.
this, right? And next thing you know, you're trying to appease everyone. And so figuring out what it is you're going to make. And that's why Zipongo just does such a great job of this. It's all right, let's help you personalize. And that's the other thing. Everyone has different dietary restrictions, right? Like
Hmm.
I eat pescatarian, and I know that's difficult for some people when they're eating food with me. They're like, all right, that's the guy who's like going to be a real pain about like us ordering any type of like chicken dish or like meat
Sure.
dish, right? And everyone has different, and people have different diets that they're on. And so what Zapongo does is say, all right, let's, in different allergies, let's take into consideration all those things and figure out recipes that meet those dietary restrictions and recommend those to you, because that's where it starts. You figure out what you're going to make,
Hmm.
right? And then figure out what other like, type of snacks or things like that you want in between. And then from there, you create the grocery list, you're right. And then you stick to that. And this way you're not adding those extra things to your house. You're exactly right.
Sure. That's great. How about the comparison? And I don't know if it's necessarily a comparison, but I think they are two big components of overall health, which is nutrition and exercise. It seems like we're marketed to often and way more than nutrition. Seems like we're advertised a lot of fitness things, which is good. Fitness is absolutely a core pillar of health. But it seems like the more I read and the more I'm learning, that nutrition is just as much up there, if not more important than fitness. Would you agree with that?
I would argue 80, 90%, right, and if you're talking about weight, like 80, 90% is probably nutrition.
Wow.
Fitness, right? And in the, what is it, 70s, 80s, we started seeing fitness being marketed as like, this is what the problem is with the country.
Yeah.
And fit gym memberships, and I understand people will be like, well, a lot of people have memberships and don't use them. Fine. Gym attendance, right, or physical activity
Hmm.
started spiking, but guess what? Obesity rates were still going up. So you look at that and you're like, well,
Yep.
how how can you argue that fitness is the issue or that fitness is the solution here? But don't get
Right.
me wrong, it's a part of it,
Hmm.
right? But I think what ends up happening for some people too is that they use fitness as an excuse to eat more, right? There's a good studies, especially for long distance runners, where people who are, and I know from your time doing marathon training, I think some people they'll go do like a long run as part of their marathon training, and then they end up consuming more calories than they even burned.
Yeah.
Because you're
I'm
like,
I'm
well,
smiling and laughing because I absolutely have done that and sometimes do that.
yeah, and you're like, I'm gonna go nuts. I earned this, right?
Yep.
But
Top
then
it off with a pizza and, and
yeah,
burger and
and then you're just doing that all the time, and then it's like, well, yeah. And the ironic thing there is you just deplete your body, and then you're replenishing it with kind of bad food, right? And we're all guilty of it, and so then you have people who are exercising in general, right? My point is people are exercising and then using that as an excuse or justification to eat more or eat poor foods, right? Like they earn that. Like fitness is an important part of it, but there's like a flip side of it where people can end up eating a lot,
mm,
can use fitness as a justification to
right.
actually end up eating more, right? Or eating poor things that you almost are not only negating, you could actually be counteracting some of the benefits you're getting from the fitness there.
Sure. That's a great point. How about for you personally? Was there ever a time have you and I know you personally, so I know that you are a healthy guy. Have you always been healthy? Was there ever a time where you kind of woke up and you realized you need to make some changes? What's the background there for you?
I It's a good question. Like, where did this begin? I mean, I was always active in high school playing sports and whatnot. And then once I got to college, that was no longer an outlet. So it was, what do I do now? And then started getting to
Mm,
fitness more and figuring out what else can I be doing on a personal level. But yeah, I ate pretty bad in college, I think, still. It was kind of after that point where I started reading more and
mm,
seeing like the effects and just feeling in college. I mean, I don't know.
yep,
I don't think you have to be the brightest person to realize you're like, all right, I ate that last night and eating those fried chicken tenders, right? Or
mm,
chicken fingers. And I
yep,
feel bad today. That's probably why. But then if I ate something better, like a salad, I felt better the next day. So maybe I
yeah,
should do more of that.
sure,
Right. And so it's just like kind of some personal experimentation. But then it just was trying to learn more and more about it. But anyhow, along the same line, what was happening was my younger brother, he was having a really tough time with weight, and his BMI was about 40, so he
mm,
was very high in terms of his the level of his obesity, and so it became like a look. I want to help him out, but I can't help him out unless I know what I'm talking about myself, right?
sure,
And so that's where and that was probably, let me think back, 6 years ago or so.
mhm,
And that was the point where it's like, okay, I'm going to actually figure all this stuff out, and I'm going to, get these certifications, actually learn about these things, and think about this versus and figure out like what it is I need to be doing to help him out. And by the way, if I'm not doing this myself, like that kind of makes me a hypocrite, right?
sure, sure,
And so I decided to start implementing those things myself and using myself as a little bit of a guinea pig. And then, next thing you know, I basically took everything I learned and I built a system with him.
mm,
And he went from 250 pounds to 160, and that's where he is
wow,
today. And he just the one who did the work. I'm not going to pretend to take any credit there, right? I was
sure,
kind of his coach and just helped him out, and like it works, right? It's not this complicated mathematical equation. It's
mm,
really it's just like eat this, don't eat this, and here's how you kind of create some processes to make sure that happens. And it's
sure,
really not rocket science. And so that was the point where I started living more like that and said, if I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to helping more people like my brother, buck that trend, then if I'm not living like that, then like what type of person am I?
sure, wow. And what a cool experience, not just for him, for really both of you as brothers to be able to go through that together and face those challenges together and to really have some really good results. To be able to do that, I think as two brothers is something really neat. You know, it's one thing if it's somebody you're paying to as a coach to have you work on certain things and improve, but to have that personal connection, I think, is a really powerful thing. So thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reason why I still do this today, right? And why I
Yeah,
left, consulting and pretty cushy job there, well-paying job there
sure.
to go join, Zipongo and kind of help fulfill that mission. And as soon as I started, very first thing I did was I wrote him a thank you note, and
Hmm.
I'm sure I was very teary-eyed as I was writing that and
Hmm.
just thanking him because like that was the inspiration for me to head down this path, and still is.
Wow. And that's so cool. That's something you'll have for the rest of your lives, knowing that your brother played a role in realizing your passion and pursuing that path. So that's really cool. I do want to mention one more thing in terms of, you were saying that when you ate certain foods, it made you feel not great that day or the next day. I'm noticing personally that as I'm eating healthier, I'm actually enjoying the foods that I thought was not so tasty. I'm actually enjoying those more than I ever have. And now to a point where if I do break and I have pizza or a burger or whatever it is, I'm actually enjoying that far less than I used to. It's almost like a reversal where I'm like enjoying the healthy food much more than I did before. And now that if I do slip up and have something unhealthy, it's like kind of gross to be honest.
Yeah, it takes a couple weeks for your taste buds to adjust, right?
Mm,
And that, I'm smiling because it's a similar experience that most people have, especially, when most people hear that I live by like a pescatarian diet, which is mostly vegetarian at this point.
mm,
they're- I couldn't imagine giving up like chicken, or I couldn't imagine giving up red meat. And
sure.
then they're a couple weeks into it and they're like, wow, like didn't realize that, you could make like tempeh, or that you could make, egg eggplant tastes so good, and this
Right.
is this is really exciting. And the thing is, like, people just they put everything in like a black and white box, and they just and part of it is just trying to imagine like moving outside one of those boxes, and it's scary, right? But like, give it a couple weeks at least and your taste buds will adjust. And that's what people now, they're like, do you miss it? Like, no, I don't, because
Yeah.
I think it tastes great. Like I,
Right.
I love making, seeing what we can make with tempeh
Yep.
and tofu, and or just none of those, and just other vegetarian based dishes, and seeing how great they can taste.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, especially given the fact that, I think, and a lot of it is advertising. We're just advertised. Gosh, now that I think about it, it's 100% advertising on commercials you see. And they show like a big juicy burger they make it look so appetizing. So I just find it interesting when you can start learning on your own that it's actually kind of the opposite in terms of taste.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad because you have, some of our top scientists in the country are being dedicated to figure out how to make things taste as best as they can. Right? Wouldn't it be great if some of those scientists were working on things like, the vaccine to, and I understand
Right.
it's the exact same type of science. We get the idea, right? If they had been dedicating that intelligence and brilliance to, like a vaccine for coronavirus, or,
Sure.
or if some of these top advertisers were using that knowledge and that skill set on instead of helping some of these people out. It's a shame, but yeah, that's
It
what I mean by
is.
being stacked against you, right? They figure out exactly how to manipulate certain
Yep.
neural pathways to say like, I want that immediately.
Yeah. Gosh, it's incredible. I want to be respectful of your time, so I will end with one more question here, a little bit more of an open-ended question. And I guess throughout our conversation, you probably have touched on it quite a bit. But who do you want to impact the most with your work?
I think it's the people who feel like they are a little bit helpless in terms of, right, those people who feel like the cards are stacked against them, and they're
Mm,
like, you know what, I want to eat better, but I don't, like, I'm being told so many different things, and I'm just like feel like I can't do anything about it, and I try, and these are the people who are going on diets, and it's just not working for them. And I it's those people that I wish hopefully will be able to get that clean slate to and be like, look, here's kind of the playbook for what you need to do, and you follow this, and it's going to be hard. It will.
Mm,
It's going to be hard. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but I guarantee you most of those, or if not all those people, have done something harder in their life. And once they kind of get going on that path, like, you know, they'll get there. They will.
yeah.
Those are the people that I want to help the most, especially, people who are struggling with obesity. And a lot of these
Mm,
people, unfortunately, are, in generally poorer areas. And being able to help those folks uh, is the dream and the goal. And
yeah.
it'll take a while. It's hard. You're fighting some massive corporate interests with a lot of money, and
Sure.
fighting a lot of cultural trends too. And
Mm,
it's tough, but
yeah.
I believe in people, and I think people will get there.
That's great. Yeah, it seems like a big piece of that is education to allow people to give them resources and tools that they didn't have before. And hopefully, I'm able to provide that to an extent on this podcast. And I know you're
Yeah.
certainly providing that, with the work you're doing at Zipongo. So that's great. I really appreciate your time and you being here with me and sharing your message and your mission with my audience. Before we wrap up here, where can people learn more? Would you like to send them over to Zipongo's website? Is there any personal online presence that you'd like people to check out more of your work?
Yeah, our website's a fine place to start. Unfortunately, it has to be provided through your insurer or your employer, so you can check to see, on our website, you can check to see if that's available for you, and if not, send me a note, or if, fill out a quick form, or you can always come to our LinkedIn page and write us a note there, and I'll kind of give you some quick form of how to ask your employer to provide it. Unfortunately, we don't provide directly to consumers, but
Sure.
I we also put a lot of content out on our LinkedIn and our social media and whatnot there. So feel free to check out what we're doing there too. I think we have we make sure everything is very much backed by science. There's no kind of silver bullet, or we don't advertise foods for a reason, because all that is against what we believe in. So
Sure.
I like to think that we're kind of like the most reputable source out there when it comes to helping people really get down to the fundamental issues with eating healthy.
That's awesome. I'll be sure to link up the website and any other social profiles in the show notes. And then just for our listeners, the spelling of that is Zipongo. It's got a nice ring to it. A lot of vowels in there. Sounds good.
Exactly. It's supposed to feel zippy, right? Give energy.
Yeah, I love that. Very cool. Well, Jared, thank you so much for your time again, and I hope you have a great day.
Well, thanks, Dan. You too. Take care.
Thanks so much.